This story is very meaningful. Everyone should hear it. Listen to Brian tell the story. I held the dress tightly against my chest, my fingers trembling as Susan stood in the doorway, her eyes burning with the same entitlement she had carried all her life. Outside my room, my mother's voice was sharp, edged with the familiar disappointment she reserved only for me. Emily, stop being selfish and give your sister the dress. She needs it more than you do. I gritted my teeth, swallowing the lump of frustration rising in my throat. She doesn't need it. She just wants it because it's mine. Susan scoffed, arms crossed. Oh, grow up. You act like I'm stealing your soul. It's just a dress, Em. Just a dress. A dress I had spent months saving for, working late shifts at the cafe, tutoring high school students, pinching every dollar until I could afford something that made me feel like I belonged. A dress for the welcome reception at my dream job, a night that could shape my entire career. But to them, none of that mattered. Dad's voice cut through my thoughts. You always make things difficult, Emily. Your sister has an interview, and you're throwing a tantrum over a piece of clothing? I stared at them, at the people who were supposed to protect me, but had spent my whole life making sure Susan got everything she wanted. The same people who had taken away my childhood Christmas gifts because Susan cried, who had forced me to miss my own award ceremony so she wouldn't feel overshadowed, who had allowed her to destroy everything I ever cared about without consequence. And now they wanted to take this from me too. Susan doesn't have an interview, I said, my voice trembling but firm. She sold her dress for makeup and a new phone case. She's lying. Susan's face twisted in anger. You little... Enough! Dad snapped, stepping forward. You will give her the dress, or so help me. You will regret it. I held my ground, my heart pounding. No. A beat of silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Then Susan lunged. I should have seen it coming. Susan never accepted a no. The moment my back hit the wall, the wind knocked out of me. I knew she would never stop until she had crushed me completely. Her fingers clawed at the fabric in my hands, nails digging into my wrists as she yanked. I struggled, but she was stronger, fueled by years of unchecked rage and entitlement. Susan, stop it, I gasped, trying to push her off. But she didn't stop. She never did. I barely registered my mother's voice yelling at me instead of her, my father stepping closer but not to help. He never helped. You always have to be difficult, Mom hissed. Why can't you just be a good sister for once? I clenched my teeth, anger rising. A good sister? Is that what you call this? Letting her take everything from me? Susan ripped the dress free from my grasp and shoved me hard. I stumbled back, my ankle twisting painfully as I hit the edge of my bed. She held the dress up triumphantly, flashing me a smear before turning on her heel. Finally, she muttered. Jesus, Em, it's just a dress. I sat there breathing heavily, feeling the sting of something much deeper than just another loss. It wasn't just a dress. It was proof that no matter how much I fought, I would always be the expendable one in this family. But not anymore. I reached for my phone with shaking hands and sent a single message. Grandma, can I see you? Grandma responded almost immediately. Of course, sweetheart. Meet me at the cafe near my house in an hour. I wiped at my face, willing myself not to cry as I stuffed my phone into my pocket. Susan was already outside my door, gloating, laughing on the phone with one of her friends, probably bragging about how she had put me in my place again. My parents' voices murmured in the background, satisfied that peace had been restored in their twisted way. I wasn't going to let this happen again. I grabbed my coat and my purse and slipped out of the house before they could notice. The night air was cold against my skin, but it felt good, like a reminder that I was still here, that I was real, even if my family treated me like I was invisible. When I reached the cafe, Grandma was already there, a cup of tea in front of her. She looked up, her sharp, warm eyes scanning my face instantly, and I knew she saw everything I was trying to hide. She reached out, covering my hand with hers. Tell me everything. I did. I told her about the dress, about Susan, about how my entire life had been a series of sacrifices I never agreed to. I told her about the phone my parents made me give up, the college prep book Susan had destroyed, the award I had won but never got to keep. I told her about the bruises Susan had left on me over the years, about the way my parents always turned a blind eye, about how I had stopped hoping for fairness a long time ago. By the time I finished, I was shaking, not from fear, but from the weight of finally letting it all out. Grandma was silent for a long moment. Then she squeezed my hand. "You are not crazy," she said, her voice fierce. "And you are not wrong for wanting to keep what is yours. You have every right to stand up for yourself." My throat tightened. "But it doesn't matter. They'll just take it anyway." She smiled, but there was something dangerous in her expression. "Not this time." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Grandma reached for her phone and started dialing. It's time the rest of the family knew the truth. The next 24 hours were a whirlwind. It started with my aunts and uncles calling my parents demanding answers. Then the family group chat exploded with messages. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years, all reacting to what Grandma had told them. My mother tried to downplay it, saying I was overreacting and being dramatic, but the truth was already out. When I went home that night, my phone was flooded with messages. "Mom, how could you do this to us? After everything we've done for you." "Dad, get home now and fix the mess you made." "Susan, you better tell Grandma you lied or I'll make you regret it." I didn't reply. Instead, I packed my things. I wasn't staying there anymore. The next morning, Grandma picked me up. I barely had time to throw my bags into the car before my parents stormed outside. "What do you think you're doing?" my mother screeched, grabbing my arm. "You can't just leave." I pulled away, my heart pounding. "Watch me." Dad stepped forward, his face red with rage. "You are not walking out on this family." "You walked out on me a long time ago," I shot back. "I'm done being your punching bag." Susan stood on the porch, arms crossed, smirking. "Fine, leave, but don't come crawling back when you fail." Grandma's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "She won't have to. Unlike you, she actually works for what she has." Susan's smirk faltered. Mom's face crumpled. "Emily, please." But I was already getting into the car. As we drove away, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, relief. For the first time, I had a real home. Grandma made sure I had everything I needed. I had my own space, my own bed, a place where I wasn't afraid of my things being stolen or destroyed. My aunts and uncles started visiting more, and for the first time I heard stories about my childhood that weren't twisted by my parents' narrative. But the biggest change? I could breathe. For weeks, my parents kept calling, alternating between threats and pleas. When they realized I wasn't coming back, they started telling the extended family that I was mentally unstable, that Grandma was poisoning my mind. No one believed them. Then the final breaking point came. It happened 2 days after my welcome reception. Grandma had bought me a new dress, a beautiful navy blue gown that made me feel powerful. She had it delivered to my aunt's house, safe from Susan's reach. The night was perfect. I met senior executives, made connections, and for the first time, I felt like I was stepping into the life I had always wanted. But when I went home the next day to grab some last things, Susan was waiting. "So," she said, sitting on my bed, scrolling through her phone, "you're taking bribes from Grandma now?" I stiffened. "What are you talking about?" she smirked. "The laptop, the one she gave you. Hand it over." I clenched my fists. "No." Her smirk vanished. "Excuse me?" She stood up, stepping closer. "You heard me," I said, standing my ground. "No." Her face twisted in rage. "You think you can just walk away? You think you can turn everyone against me?" I tried to move past her, but she blocked the door. "Hand it over, Em," she said, her voice deceptively soft. "Or I'll take it." I didn't have time to react before she grabbed my hair and slammed my head into the doorframe. Pain exploded through my skull, and I felt warm liquid rush down my face. Blood. For a second, everything went black. When I came to, I was on the floor, Susan standing over me, breathing hard. "Oops," she said, not even bothering to hide her grin. I heard footsteps pounding up the stairs. Then my aunt burst in, her face pale. "Susan, what the hell?" She saw me on the floor, bleeding, and her expression changed instantly. "I'm calling the police." That was the end. Within hours, the police were at the house. My parents tried to spin the story, claiming it was an accident, but the officers weren't buying it. Susan was arrested for assault, and I was taken to the hospital with a broken nose. This time, my parents couldn't cover for her. And just like that, their perfect image shattered. Things spiraled fast after that. Word spread through the family, through the neighborhood, through Dad's job. Clients pulled out of deals. Mom's friends stopped returning her calls. Their country club membership was quietly revoked. People who once worshipped Susan suddenly wanted nothing to do with her. She tried to play the victim, but no one was listening. Not anymore. And me, I was free. I moved into my own place, kept my ball, and started living for myself. I still see Grandma every weekend. We sit on her porch, drinking tea, watching the sun go down. "You did it, sweetheart," she told me last week. "You finally got away." I smiled, feeling the weight of my past lift. "Yeah," I said, "I did." And for the first time in my life, I believed it. But Susan wasn't done with me. Even after her arrest, after the police took pictures of my broken nose and the bruises on my arms, after she was forced to spend a night in jail before Grandma's lawyer made sure she couldn't get away with just a slap on the wrist, she still came after me. At first, it was the texts. "Susan, you think you've won? You have no idea what you just did. Mom, you need to drop the charges. Susan is suffering because of you. Dad, come home. Let's talk like a family." I blocked their numbers. Then the social media posts started. Susan made new accounts, spewing lies about me. She told everyone I had always been jealous of her, that I was unstable, that I had attacked her first. Her fake friends, people who thrived off the drama she created, jumped in, commenting, calling me a liar. But she didn't stop there. One morning I walked into work, still adjusting to my new routine, still trying to convince myself I was safe. Then my manager called me into his office. "Emily," he said, his voice careful, "we had an incident." My stomach dropped. "What kind of incident?" He turned his monitor around. The security footage played on the screen. Susan in the lobby, demanding to see me. "I need to talk to my sister," she screamed at the receptionist. "She's ruining my life." Security had to escort her out. I sat frozen, my nails digging into my palms. "She just showed up here?" My manager nodded. "Your uncle in HR filled me in. We're increasing security. Do you want to press charges for harassment?" I hesitated. Pressing charges for the assault had been one thing. I had proof, witnesses, even a police report. But this was just Susan being Susan. But then I remembered the look in her eyes that night in my bedroom. Remembered the way she had smiled after she hurt me. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "Press charges." That should have been the end of it, but my parents still didn't get it. They showed up at Grandma's house. I was in the kitchen when I heard the shouting outside. My stomach twisted. I rushed to the window and saw them. Mom, Dad, standing on the porch arguing with Grandma. "Let us see her," Dad was saying, his voice tight with anger. "She's tearing this family apart." "She's protecting herself," Grandma shot back. "Something you should have done a long time ago." I flinched as Mom's voice broke. "We just want to talk to her," Grandma crossed her arms. "You want to talk? Talk through a lawyer." Dad's face turned red. "We raised her. We gave her everything." "Everything?" Grandma's voice shook with fury. "You gave her nothing. You let Susan take and take until there was nothing left." I had never heard my grandma sound so angry before. Mom tried to push past her. "She's still our daughter. You only remember that now?" Grandma stepped in front of the door. "You want to see her? You'll have to go through me." I swallowed hard. My hands were trembling. They weren't here to apologize. They were here to make me fold. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I stepped outside, my heart hammering. Mom gasped when she saw me, my bruised face, the bandage on my nose. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, stepping forward like she actually cared. I held up a hand. "Don't." She flinched. "I don't want to hear it," I said, my voice shaking. "You knew what Susan was like. You knew what she did to me, and you let it happen." Dad scowled. "You're making a big deal out of nothing." "A broken nose isn't nothing," Grandma snapped. Mom's eyes filled with tears. "She's still your sister." "No," I said, my voice firm. "She's not." Silence. Mom wiped her eyes. "We'll cut you off financially if you keep this up." I laughed. They had never given me a cent. Grandma folded her arms. "She's doing just fine without you." Dad clenched his jaw. "You'll regret this, Emily." But I wouldn't. I had spent my entire life regretting not standing up for myself sooner. They turned and walked away. For the first time, I let them go. Susan didn't stop trying to get to me, but it didn't matter anymore. She was arrested again 2 weeks later after showing up at my workplace a second time, screaming at my coworkers, threatening to ruin my life. This time she couldn't talk her way out of it. The restraining order became permanent. My parents stopped calling, stopped trying. Their perfect family image was destroyed. And me, I thrived. My job flourished. My coworkers supported me. Grandma helped me find an apartment of my own. For the first time, I made real friends. I laughed. I lived. I was free. And Susan? She faded into the background, a storm that had finally passed. She tried to break me, but all she did was make me stronger. I stood on the balcony of my new apartment, the city lights stretching far beyond what I could see. The air was cool, crisp, carrying the scent of freedom, something I had never truly known until now. For the first time in my life, I had a space that was mine. No one could take anything from me anymore. No one could force me to give up what I worked for. No one could make me feel small. My phone buzzed on the table beside me, a message from Grandma. Grandma, proud of you, sweetheart. Dinner this Sunday? I smiled. Me, wouldn't miss it for the world. Things were finally falling into place. Work was going well. I was making friends, building a future. No longer walking on eggshells, no longer flinching at every raised voice. I could leave my things on the counter without worrying they'd disappear. I could buy something nice for myself without fearing it would be taken away. My life was finally mine. But Susan's wasn't. The last I heard, she had left town after her second arrest. No one wanted anything to do with her anymore. The friends who used to encourage her cruelty had disappeared when she became too much of a liability. My parents, once the pillars of her endless entitlement, had lost their social standing and were struggling to rebuild their lives somewhere else. No more lavish parties, no more reputation to uphold. I could only imagine how she felt, watching everything she had manipulated and controlled crumble beneath her. For years, she had thrived on the idea that she was untouchable, that she could get away with anything. Now she was just another cautionary tale, a person whose lies and abuse finally caught up to her. But I didn't hate her. Not anymore. Hating her meant I still cared. And the truth was, I had moved on. The lesson in all of this? Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who hurt you the worst. And no matter how much they gaslight you, how much they try to convince you that you are the problem, you are not obligated to keep them in your life. Family is not about blood. It's about the people who show up for you, who protect you, who love you without conditions. It took me years to learn that. And I hope that if anyone out there is going through something similar, they find the strength to walk away too. Because you deserve better. You always have. If you've made it this far, tell me, have you ever had to cut someone toxic out of your life? How did it change you? Let me know in the comments. And if you haven't already, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes the hardest part of healing is realizing that you were never the problem to begin with.